Hello, girl-splainers! Have you ever looked at a D&D character sheet and thought, what? Well, today, I'm here to clear up that confusion for you. Let's get into it. Putting together a character and looking at that character sheet can be one of the most intimidating parts of starting to play Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot of boxes, and everything's always changing, and everything means something different, and there's sometimes different ways that people look at certain parts of it, so let's go over it together to just clear up any confusion that you might have about character sheets. Let's start with where to get them. I like to just Google 5e, which stands for 5th edition character sheet, and you'll find some that are PDF printable. You can also fill them online. I do like to print them out and fill them by hand because I think it's nicer, but you can just download them and it's super easy. Let's start up at the top with that little box on the right. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. So level is going to be how much experience you have. You could start at level 1, you could start at 3, you could start at 5. Those are common places to start. It's really up to the DM's discretion. Your character level is going to be different than your spellcasting level, and this is your character level. So everybody will generally start out in the same place. Leveling up gives you more health points, more features, more abilities, and then more spell slots, among other things. Class is, in my opinion, the biggest thing that affects your gameplay. This is something you choose when you build your character. It determines your abilities, your bonuses, and spells. This is things like Bard, Barbarian, Paladin. Background is another thing you choose when you create your character. This functionally is for stats and bonuses, and it also works into backstory and roleplay. Race, world building. In the Forgotten Realms canon, there's definitely different attitudes towards different races as there are different backgrounds and classes. These are things like elf, orc, human, etc. Again, these will affect your stats, bonuses, abilities, languages, and proficiencies, among other things. Alignment. This is probably a chart you've seen before. You can be true neutrals right in the center. Then there's the scale of lawful to chaotic and the scale of good to evil. So you can be anything in that 9 box there. This affects how your character acts and usually kind of works with a class or a race that you've picked. XP, or experience points. So your leveling can be based on XP or milestone. XP-based leveling is you get points for certain things, and then there's thresholds where you or your party will all level up. And then milestone is when there's a big plot point that your party makes progress. That'll level up at the DM's discretion. Sometimes this is for, big emotional plot points, or you've just gotten to a certain point where they've decided it's time to move your abilities and the story along. Moving right on down to inspiration, this is basically a checkbox that you can mark to say whether you have it or not. It's going to represent a bonus that you can add to a dice roll, and it is typically given out at the DM's discretion. This can be for following your character alignment or background really well, or just doing something clever that they really liked and they want to reward you for good play or good role play. Right under inspiration is your proficiency bonus. This is going to be a number like +2, for example. So if you have proficiency, it means you're naturally good at something, and you're going to add that bonus to a roll when you do something that's relevant to that skill or ability. The boxes on the left on the side are going to be your ability scores. These can range from 1 to 20, 1 being the absolute worst, 20 being pretty much perfect, and 10 being pretty average. Going through these, strength measures physical power, dexterity measures agility, constitution is all about endurance, intelligence is like book smarts, so that's measuring reasoning and memory, wisdom is more like street smarts, that measures perception and insight, and charisma is a force of personality. With ability scores, you're going to have a base score and then a bonus or a minus, depending on what that score is. So you'll generally roll for your scores. Sometimes people just pick them, but rolling is kind of randomly generated and fun. If you get just 10, that's kind of the average benchmark base 0. You're going to get a +0. Anywhere from 9 through 8, you're going to get -1. And then 7 through 6, you'd get -2. So whenever you do something that's relevant for that score, like an ability check, you would get -1 to that if you had a 9 or an 8. Anything that's above 10, you go in increments of 2. So you get +0 for 10 and 11. And then at 12, you start getting +1. So 12, 13 is +1. And then 14, 15 is +2. So the maximum number you can have is 20, and that represents a +5 bonus. There's a little bit of controversy here because there's a big argument in the D&D community about which one you put in which box. Personally, I like to put the base score in the square box and the bonus in the little oval box. There's no right way to do it. This is just what I do. One of the things that can get a little bit confusing is the difference between ability checks and saving throws. So ability checks are going to be using those abilities on the side and your score is there, and they're going to be proactive. So an example of this is if you said, I'm going to push over that boulder, and your DM said, make a strength check. So you would roll typically a d20, and then you would add whatever bonus for strength that you have based on your ability score. A saving throw is different than an ability check. A saving throw is reactive, so that's when you try to resist a spell or effect. Here's an example. You get frostbite cast on you. The DM says make a constitution save. You might save and then only take half the damage, that's why that's relevant. And you're going to have different bonuses for saving throws. These are generally determined by things like class, race, background, etc. The key to that difference is proactive versus reactive. So if you're doing something, that's going to be with ability checks, and then saving throws are going to be when something is happening to you. Right below saving throws is skills. There's a lot of them, and a lot of them are self-explanatory, so I won't go over all of them, but I'll go over a couple. Acrobatics and athletics are just a little bit different. As you can see, next to acrobatics, you have dex, which means the bonus for that comes from your dexterity. And then the bonus for athletics comes from strength. Often it is up to the DM's discretion which one you use, although you can argue kind of based on your bonuses which one you'd want to use in a certain situation, but it's really up to the DM. Arcana, that's anything to do with magic. Insight is what people mean as opposed to what they say, or if you're trying to figure out someone's true intentions, figure out if they're lying. Investigation is looking for things as opposed to just noticing them. That would be passive perception. That would be perception. Investigation is if you're like really actively looking for something. Survival, it's like in the woods. Are you camping? Are you hunting? Are you making food? Something like that. I'm going to call that block that's right in the middle the health block. This is the one that's got armor class, initiative, etc. So let's start with armor class since it's right there. This is AC. And this is how much defense you have. So an attacker will roll to hit, and if the roll plus the modifiers equal or exceed your AC, it will hit you. This is often boosted by wearing a shield or wearing different types of armor. Initiative is how quickly you start off a combat. This is a bonus to the D20 roll. Sometimes you might have an effect that means you can't be surprised, or you have a bonus to your initiative so that you'll go first in combat. Speed is how far you can move in one turn. The standard is generally 30 feet. If you have a swimming speed or a flying speed, those might be different and they'll be noted separately. You've also got current versus temporary hit points. There are some spells that give you temporary hit points that last maybe until a long rest or some other trigger, but this is just where you get to keep track of how much HP you have. So for hit dice and short rests, when you take a short rest, which is like a couple hours in canon, you can choose to expend hit dice up to your maximum, and you get this from your class and level, and this will allow you to regain a certain amount of health. Let's talk about death saves next. If you reach 0 hit points, you go unconscious, and then on your turn, you're going to be rolling death saves. This is an unmodified d20. 1 through 9 is a failure, and 10 through 20 is a success. So you have just a teeny tiny slightly more likely chance to succeed than to fail. 3 successes, you regain 1 hit point, and you are considered stable. And then after 3 fails, you die. Yikes. Right below that, you can see the attacks and spellcasting block, which has the name, the attack bonus, and then the damage and type of damage that that attack will do. This can be formatted how you like with your weapons or your abilities or your spells. It's just a way for you to keep track of what you can do in combat on your turn. So the attack bonus is something you're going to add to your roll to hit. For melee, this will be your strength bonus, and then for ranged, it is your dexterity bonus. If you are proficient with that type of weapon, you will add your proficiency bonus to this as well. For spellcasting, you're going to roll a d20 to hit, generally. There's different casting times. They can be instantaneous, it can be a bonus action and action, it can take X number of minutes, it can be ritual cast. There's lots of ways to cast spells. There is also something called a spell save DC, which is a difficulty class. That is how difficult it is to resist your spell. So if you have a spell save DC of 15, the enemy has to roll a saving throw of 15 or greater to pass the save, otherwise it hits them with full force. In the little damage box in that attacks and spell casting, it's going to be whatever die amount of damage you're doing plus the type. So that is piercing, slashing, bludgeoning, etc. There's lots of types of damage. The reason that this is relevant is because some enemies or armors or weapons, or there's just lots of things that can give you either vulnerability to or protection from certain types of damage. So it may do more or it may do less depending on what kind of damage you're doing with that weapon or spell. There's also a whole separate sheet for spell casting, so don't worry about that. On the right-hand side of the sheet, you've got personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. These are all really great flavor to add to your character and their backstory. They are not always super relevant in combat and some roleplay. Sometimes people ignore them. The player's handbook does have specific suggestions, and you can either choose from the list or roll for them. I tend to maybe pick one off the list or maybe just make something up so that I am guided by certain principles when I am role-playing. Right under that is going to be this really huge box that is features and traits. Feature is often shortened to feat, and this is a talent or expertise that is represented as a special characteristic or ability. You can get these when leveling up, you can get them as part of a class or racial bonus. Sometimes they come with ability score improvements, sometimes they come with extra flavor. I like to pick them, if I'm picking two, I'll definitely pick one that has a really practical application for my character, and I'll pick another one that has a fun flavor application for the backstory. These are just ways that you can make it a little bit more interesting and not just be putting numbers on your character sheet. You can get somebody that grapples really well, or somebody that's sworn to protect others and gets bonuses for that. So these are a really fun way to make your character a little bit more interesting. To the left of features and traits is equipment. This is going to be anything that you're carrying on your character. So rope, toolkits, weapons, armor, anything that you've got on you. Then there's other proficiencies and languages all the way over on the left. This could be a proficiency with musical instruments or a specific type of toolkit. It also might be another kind of language. This might come from your race or your background, and you'll be able to choose that when you are creating your character. Last but not least, there's that little box that says passive wisdom, or it might say passive perception. This is a measure of how well you just naturally notice things that are going on around you. Something might be going on around you, but if your passive perception isn't good, your character will be oblivious and they will not notice that thing that's going on. There's also other complete pages to the character sheet. This is the main one. The secondary one that I will show here has a lot more of physical and emotional traits. This is helping you build your backstory. So you've got age, height, weight, eyes, what their skin looks like, what hair they've got, appearance. You have a section on allies and organizations. So this is some way that you can really tie into the world building that your DM has done. You've got backstory, you've got additional features and traits, and any treasure that you're carrying. I tend to not write my backstory on here and just not use this page. I will write my backstory and all of this in a Google Doc or somewhere else and share it with my DM and my group members as appropriate. I also tend to be doing virtual sessions, so a lot of my character sheet stuff is all on D&D Beyond. The third page of the character sheet here is the spellcasting page. Up at the top, you're going to see your spellcasting class. So this is generally what type of spells you're going to be doing, whether you're a wizard or you're a bard or you're a sorcerer. Those all have different spells that you can work from, and there are ways to borrow spells from other classes, but generally that's your class. Your spellcasting ability is whichever ability you're using to cast spells. So it could be intelligence or it could be something else. Your spell save DC, we already talked about, that's going to be how difficult it is to resist the effects of your spells. And then your spell attack bonus will also be coming from your ability scores. Really quickly, let's just go over the basic structure of this. You'll see a little number in that box to the left, and that is going to be the spell level. So if it's 0, that's a cantrip, and you can generally cast as many of those as you like, no matter what spellcasting class you are. Spell level 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9, you will have a certain amount of spells that you can cast in those levels. You'll also have a number of spell slots. That's going to be the little box that is just to the right of the spell level. That's the maximum number of spells that you can cast in a certain amount of time, usually a long rest. And then the box to the right of that is just a place where you can tally how many you've expended. So if I have 3 spell slots total and I got 2 tick marks, I only have 1 spell left of that level that I can cast before taking a long rest. And then you can write down all of the names of the spells underneath. There's a lot of different ways that spellcasting works with the different classes, so I will go over that in another video about spellcasting. But generally, this is how that sheet is going to work for all classes. I hope this brief tutorial helps you understand the breakdown of the character sheet. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions about anything that I said here, and good luck building your first character.